Hi, Asipa. Hopefully you can hear me.
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Yes,
Asipa,
yes,
can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Let me just check that I've got this onto MacBook Pro and MacBook Pro. Okay. Hello? Asipa. Oh, hang on. This was me being silly. I've got my, there we go. Trying again. Hello?
Hi, can you hear
Hi,
me?
Can
Sue.
you say something, Asipa?
We
Oh,
can hear
hang
you.
on. Sorry.
Can you hear us on your side?
Maybe. We can't hear her. I don't know if she's talking. Oh, maybe it should be the external speakers. That's why. Speakers. Projector. Hey, you can hear me. Thanks, Sipa. Can you just keep saying hello or something? And hopefully sooner or later I'll click the right button so I can hear you.
Hi, Sue. Still not
What is
audible?
going wrong here? And now, hello.
Hi, Sue.
I can't hear anything. Okay,
You still can't hear?
that worked. You heard that. So that means that
Can someone else on the Zoom speak to us?
Asipa, can you just say something again? Or who else is in the room? Atunkosi.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Atunkosi. Gosh, haven't seen you for years. Can you say something and let me just see if I can hear you?
Hi, Sue. I can hear you.
Nope.
Loudly.
Atunkosi's talking, but I can't hear. So it must be speaker. Okay, trying again. Keep
Hi.
trying. I can hear you. Thank you.
You can hear us.
Okay.
Hi. Sorry, that was I'm trying to figure out if this is the same Atunkosi you were on campus a few years ago. Am I right?
No, I am going to be starting at Rhodes only this year for PhD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a different
Yeah.
Atunkosi, but it's so good to have you with us. You are the early
Thank
bird
you.
that gets the worm. And hopefully some others will be joining us shortly. So I'm going to
Yes.
quickly go off to the loo, but I'll leave you guys here and we'll get started in a few minutes.
Okay, cool.
To those who have joined us already, we will get started in a few minutes' time, just to let you know that we are here and we will start soon. Thank you. Hi, everyone who's joined us online. Please be patient. We'll start in a few minutes' time. Thank you. Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. So welcome to the people who are in the room with me, and welcome to the people who are online. My name is Sue McKenna. I am the director of the Centre for Postgraduate Studies. And this afternoon, we are going to be hearing from Chrissie Boughey. And as you can see, thank you, Asipe, for the slide. Chrissie is an emeritus professor, and she has been doing research in the field of higher education for many years, using qualitative research. And before her retirement, she was Deputy Vice Chancellor here at Rhodes University. But she didn't, like most people when they're on top management positions, they just do doggy paddle to stay afloat, and they certainly don't manage to keep up their research profile, but somehow Chrissie did manage to juggle those things, and so she continues to be a very active researcher and supervisor. But today she's going to be talking to us about NRF rating, and I'm sure Chrissie will explain to you, but NRF rating is the South African system by the National Research Foundation of rating academic researchers. And once you have a rating, which could be A, B, C, Y, or P, is that correct? Once you have a rating, it gives you access to certain funding and certain projects and so on. But it's on the basis of your research profile. So the more established you are as a researcher, the more likely you are to get rating and to get funding. And Chrissie is herself on a specialist evaluation panel at the NRF, which basically means that when people have applied for rating, those applications get sent out to reviewers all over the world to give their comments on whether they think the person is worth rating and so on. But then a specialist evaluation panel, including people like Chrissie, then sit with those applications and those reviews from around the world and make decisions. And so it's a very fraught system. It's politically fraught. I think it's quite contentious. I think there's all sorts of pros and cons, but it is here. And so for those of you who are academics, it's clearly something that you need to think about if you are wanting to get rating. If you've already got rating and you're wanting to improve your rating, because your rating only lasts 5 years, then certainly there are things that you need to consider. And Chrissie speaks as both a rated researcher, so someone who's been on that side of things, applying for rating, but also now as this specialist bringing insider knowledge of what actually happens when the NRF make these decisions. What is it that they're looking for? So I'm going to hand over to Chrissie. Welcome, Chrissie. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights. And I don't know if you've got a PowerPoint that you want to share. Go ahead and share it if you do. And I'll hand the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I see that I don't know how many people are in the room, but there are 16 online. So it's clearly something that interests a lot of people. So my experience of serving on one of these specialist committees, these rating committees, I think they're called evaluation committees. It was a real eye-opener for me. And I wish I had known what I know having served on the committee when I did my last rating application, because I'm pretty certain that I would have written a better application. I would have done things differently. And I think I might have got a better rating if I'd known what I know now. I am, my fault, culpa mea. I approached the rating system with some skepticism. And I must confess that I didn't put a lot of effort into preparing my applications. I got rated both times, but I wasn't heavily invested in the system. I'm still skeptical, but I realize that it's increasingly important for all sorts of things, not least promotion, including at Rhodes University. I don't think the funding benefits are huge anymore, and that's largely because the NRF itself is short of money. And rated researchers, for example, used to get an amount of funding every year. They don't get that any longer. I think they just get it once or twice within a cycle. So, but Rhodes University is very good. It will give you money every year as a rated researcher. But I suppose I'm quite fortunate in that the kind of research I do hasn't required me to have research funding. I mean, I've used research funding for transcription and things in the past, but I haven't really needed much research funding. And I probably need it even less now because you can interview people online and things like that. But it's useful to have some money to go to international conferences. Very useful. Anyway, so I'm just going to accept that the rating system exists. As Sue says, it's flawed, it's contentious. But if you are going to apply for rating, I think that understanding the rating system, certainly as I understand it now, having served on one of these panels, is worth it before you try to put together an application. So I'm going to switch off my video and I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. Okay. So let's see where we get to. There's quite a lot of quite complicated information. I will aim to give us lots of time for discussion at the end. But if you've got anything really pressing to say, either put it in the chat box, I'll try and keep an eye on that, or stick up your hand. The hands generally show. Okay, so let's see where we get to. So the rating system relies on peer review. It's not actually what the specialist panel, people like me, think of you. It's what your peers in your field think of you that counts. So hold that in your head. It's about what your peers in your knowledge area, your disciplinary area, think of you that's important. And because of that, I think an applicant's understanding of and use of the peer review system is key. And this is something I didn't understand when I did my previous applications. So it was like a penny drop moment for me when I was on the specialist committee and I realized this is what it was like. And I was thinking, oh, why didn't I do that? So I hope I can help you going forward. Okay, I've got an example here of a description of an A rating. So this is a description of a person who gets rated as an A rated researcher. Okay, but what I want you to look at are the words I've highlighted in red. So A-rated researchers are researchers who are unequivocally recognized by their peers as leading international scholars. Okay, look on. You've got two categories of A's. An A1 is a researcher who is recognized by all reviewers. Look at that red. An A2 is a researcher who is recognized by the overriding majority of reviewers. So it's about the number of your reviewers who recognize you as being this leading international scholar. I'm going to build on this by looking at the other categories. Look at the B's. This is a B-rated researcher. So B-rated researchers are researchers who enjoy considerable international recognition by their peers for the high quality and impact of their recent research outputs. Now look at the red. A B1, all reviewers are firmly convinced that the applicant enjoys considerable international recognition. The B2, all or the overriding majority of reviewers are firmly convinced. B3, most of the reviewers are convinced. And so it goes on. Here's a C rating. C rating, C researchers are established researchers with a sustained record of productivity. Okay, so they've got this body of quality work, which is coherent, and they demonstrated the ability to conceptualize problems. But look now at the C1, C2, C3. Look at the red. All of the researchers are all of the reviewers are firmly convinced. C2, with the exception of no more than a single reviewer, raising some minor concerns, all the other reviewers are firmly convinced. And C3, most of the reviewers concur. So it's about the extent to which the majority or all of your reviewers agree that you are, if I go back to the C, an established researcher, or I go back to the B, a researcher who enjoys considerable international recognition. Okay, so it's about the extent to which there is consensus amongst your reviewers that you have this status. And we can go on and we can look at the Y, same thing. Y rated researchers, young researchers, and look at the red. Y1, a young researcher, 5 years from the PhD, recognized by all reviewers. Y2, recognized by all or the overriding majority of reviewers. So in this case, for example, if you had 4 reviews and 3 clearly recognized you as having potential to establish yourself as a researcher, if 4 of them did that, you get a Y1. If 3 of them did that, you get Y2, because you've got one reviewer who's expressing some doubt. Can you see how it works? It's about the number or the majority of the reviewers who are going to give you that rating. And P is the same, recognized by all or the overriding majority of reviewers. So a whole lot in your mind. So your application goes out to a number of reviewers, and I'm going to explain that now. And ideally what you want is for all the people who review your application to come back and say, yes, this person is a C, or yes, this person is a B. Because you're going to come in as a B1, a B2, a C1, C2, C3, whatever, Y1, Y2. Those subcategories, if you like, depend on whether it's the majority or the overriding majority, and so on, who are saying that about you. Okay, big point for me. I didn't know that. I hadn't read the documentation. I didn't know that. Had I known that, I would have looked at my nominations for reviewers differently. But I'll explain about who gets to review you now. So how does the system work? Well, all applicants complete an application form. And what you can do on the application form is nominate up to 6 active researchers as reviewers. So you can nominate up to 6. I've never nominated 6. I didn't realize it was important for me to nominate 6. I think I might have put 3 down, 2 down. I don't know what I did. I could go back and look, but I haven't bothered. I certainly didn't put 6 down. And when you nominate, you have to say what your relationship is with the reviewer and the reason for that nomination to be specified. Now, let me say now, I don't think it's a good idea to nominate your supervisor. Certainly the committee I was on, we were suspicious because obviously the supervisor, you know, sometimes they're called the promoter. They want you to do well. I hope they want you to do well. And so the supervisor might be viewed as somebody who might be prejudiced, biased in some way, and promote you. Okay, so you'd have to say this person was my supervisor, or you should say this person is my supervisor. Not everybody did that, but the specialist committee has to vet the reviewers, and in that case, some of us picked up that, hang on, there's a supervisor being nominated here. What you ideally want is to nominate someone who is in your field, who is a specialist in your field, who knows your work, or who will understand how your work fits into a bigger knowledge field. In any knowledge area, you can stand in different locations. You'll draw on particular kinds of theory, or you'll adopt a particular position, and so on and so on, or you'll have a particular research interest. So you want people to be your reviewers who will understand your work, be able to give it an expert reading. Okay, and ideally, obviously, you want people who are well-established researchers themselves. I mean, yeah, would I, if I had people who were holding professorial positions coming in to the rating panel, I'm not going to appoint people from junior positions to be their reviewers. So you ideally want as senior people in your field as possible to be your reviewers. The other thing that you can do is you can indicate which reviewers should be excluded. Now that's quite a clever move. I worked with one candidate in this last rating round, and a number of reviewers were excluded, and I knew immediately why they were excluded, and it was because they sat in a different position with regard to. And let me give you a bit more background. The person who'd come in as an applicant worked in a field called literacy studies, reading and writing, academic literacy. You can occupy different positions in that field. You can draw on different kinds of theory. And what the person had done was indicate that some reviewers who would draw on theory produced in an area of that field called new literacy studies, which sees reading and writing as a set of socially embedded practices, not as neutral skills. The applicant has indicated that people working from that position should be excluded, okay? Because their work sat in the other position. Their work sat in the position which saw reading and writing as neutral skills. Now, I was on the specialist committee and I understood that field. So what am I going to do? I'm actually going to have to bring in some reviewers who will actually draw on their knowledge of the whole field. But generally, the exclusions, they were on the basis of the applicant knowing that the reviewers occupied a different, let's call it ideological position to them. But then the specialist committee has to decide whether that's appropriate, and therefore they'll bring in other reviewers. Okay, so basically, I'm saying two things here. You've got the choice to nominate 6 reviewers. Nominate 6. find six. Find six people who are as well known, as highly respected as you possibly can. And also, you need to think about where those six people might sit in your field. You won't necessarily be able to exclude from the reviewing process people who are ideologically opposed to where you sit. You won't necessarily be able to do that. And the example I just gave you, I could see that this is what had happened. And as a member of the specialist panel, I chose to bring in other people to look at this review, because I thought it was important for them, for us to have a view of the whole field. But if you're applying, nominate six and choose your six carefully. I'm going to come back to this idea of nominating your six again, but hold it now. Choose six and think about who those six are very carefully. The other thing I didn't know is that the applicant's institution rates the applicant. So you will submit your application to the research office at Rhodes University, if that's where you are. Rhodes University looks at your application. They might give you some feedback, but they will also state what they think you deserve as a researcher. And that appears, the panel can see that, specialist panel can see that, and they'll look at it particularly at the end of the process when your rating is becoming evident, because they might be able then to anticipate any disputes, because an institution might dispute a rating that's been given to an applicant. In the panel I worked on, one institution consistently rated its applicants more highly than emerged from the process. This was a university that was really pushing hard to become a research intensive, and obviously they wanted more highly rated researchers on their staff. So I personally don't think that's a good move on the part of that university, because the specialist panel certainly sort of took a step back and thought, oh, what are they doing in this research office? But it's important to know that your institution, if it's Rhodes, it will rate you before your application goes in. Okay, so you've nominated 6 reviewers and you apply, you press the button submit. So you've filled in your application form, quite a long form, and you've submitted your best outputs. You have to do that. So what happens then is your applications are assigned to members of a specialist committee, as I said, and that was the committee that I served on. So I served on an education specialist committee. There are 2 education specialist committees because of the number of applications that come in from education. And I was the higher education specialist on that committee. So the other members of the committee were all looking at general and basic education. My role on the committee was to look at those people coming in from a higher education background. So what did I have to do as a member of the specialist committee? Well, my job, first of all, was to read the application and to nominate 6 reviewers. So remember, the applicant has nominated 6, ideally, right? I can choose in my 6 reviewers, I can choose a maximum of 3 that you've nominated. Now, if you've only nominated 2, I can only choose 2, providing I think that they are eligible, right? And I'm going to look at the reasons why you've given why they're eligible. And I struck out supervisors, for example, at that point. So as a specialist committee member, I can take 3 of the potential 6 that you've nominated. But of the 6 you've nominated, I might not think all 6 are suitable. So I might only think 4 are suitable. So I can then take 3 of the 4. So your best bet really is to try to nominate 6 who are all suitable, who all meet the grade, as it were, and to be considered eligible by the specialist committee member. So I'll take 3, but maybe you've only got 2, but I've got to get 6. If you've got 3, I've got to search for 3 independent reviewers. And in my search for the 3 independent reviewers, I'm going to use my knowledge, in my case of the field of higher education studies, to find reviewers who I think will best be able to give your application a rigorous reading. However, if you've only got 2 reviewers, I'm going to have to find 4. So you're dependent on me to find 4 for you. Okay? So I hope I'm making the point strongly enough that it's really important for you, the applicant, to nominate these 6 reviewers, all of whom will be eligible, considered eligible by the specialist committee, who will give your application a rigorous review and who have some standing in your field and who will understand what the kind of work you do. You want them to understand the work that you do. Because if you don't nominate 6 and I can pick 3, if I can only take 2 from whoever you've nominated, then you're going to rely on me, the member of the specialist committee, to find the reviewers for you. So if you don't do that work in nominating your reviewers, you I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Okay, so I'm checked. I'm a member of the specialist committee. I'm not the chair. I'm a member. So I've then got 6 reviewers for you, the applicant, and they go to the chair of the specialist committee, and that person will either approve my nomination or will challenge it in some way. I didn't have anybody challenge my nomination, anybody challenged in my nominations. But the chair of the committee is checking my work, if you like. And then these 6 reviewers are approached by an NRF staff member to ask if they'll do the review. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then if they say they will do the review, they'll receive the application documents in the form, the application form, the copies of the best outputs identified by the applicant. So that goes to them. So then we sit and we wait. Okay. What happens then? So the reviews eventually come in. But let me move forward. I should have probably said this earlier. I should have put this slide before the last one. It's common, very, very common for reviewers not to complete a review. So they say they'll do the review, and then the application form and the outputs, all the documentation is sent to them, but the review never comes in spite of repeated nudges, requests, pleas from the NRF staff. It comes to the date of the committee meeting, of the rating meeting, and the reviews are outstanding. And in fact, thanks to all the nudging and pushing, we were still getting reviews within an hour of the start of the meeting that morning. But very common to have gaps. Okay, very common for you to come to the committee and you've only got 4 out of a potential 6 reviews. Very common. You can go on 4. Best have 6, but you can go on 4. So it seems to me that you not only want 6 reviewers who know your work or who know the field that you work in well, who have some standing, who are experts and so on, but you want them to complete the review. You don't want them to say they will and then they won't. So this suggests to me that you've got to contact the reviewers and really try to convince them of the importance of doing this review for you. And I think all this comes back to networking, you know, and it's difficult for young people because, you know, less experienced academic staff, because you don't necessarily have those networks. You're not well known. But in my case, I didn't do it anyway. And I think I am older and I knew a lot of people, but I didn't get a commitment out of the people that I was nominating to review my work, that they would actually do it, that this was important. And I don't think I gave 6 reviewers anyway. The other thing that's very common is for reviewers to provide a relatively poor quality report, or a report that's only partly usable, or even a report that's considered unsatisfactory. And I'll show you what happens, how as the reports come in, they themselves are evaluated. But when a report comes in and it's judged as unsatisfactory, it's scrapped. It's not considered any further. So can you see how you nominate, suppose you only nominate 4 reviewers. The member of the specialist committee decides 1 is unsuitable. So, okay, you've then got to nominate 3. 1 of the 3 comes in and doesn't do enough work, does a very scrappy report, so it's judged unsatisfactory. Only 2 of the people you've nominated then serve as your reviewers. So it seems to me that it's really, really important that you can choose, you nominate your reviewers, and that they are people who you can trust to actually do the work and do the work well. But there's more on this. But let me go back. So remember, let's go back to the stage where your application documents have been sent out to 6 people. And not all of those 6 submit, but some of them submit, okay? So as a member of the specialist committee, what I then have to do is read the review, okay? And the first thing that I have to do is evaluate the review itself. So I'm the committee member. I'm not evaluating you. I'm evaluating your reviewer. I'm evaluating the review submitted by your reviewer. And basically, the categories are there. I have to grade the review as excellent, good, satisfactory, partly usable, unsatisfactory. That's really important, that the review itself is graded by the specialist committee. If you've got unsatisfactory, they're struck out. Partly usable, if you've got enough of the 1, 2, or 3 categories, they will go. That's better. But at this stage, when some of the reviews are of poor quality, more reviewers are going to have to be sought. And you can't nominate them then. We're going to nominate them for you. So as I've said, the committee is looking for excellent, good, or satisfactory reviews, which is why I said that you want your reviewer to be committed to really engaging with your application and to writing a thorough report. So that ideally they're going to get a 1, an excellent, or a 1/2 rating. And one last thing to remember is that if you are a reviewer, then the grading of the reviews that you've done is kept on the system. So as somebody who was selecting reviewers, I could see the quality of the reviews that had previously been submitted by the people I was considering using as reviewers. So everything's captured. So if you're consistently submitting scrappy reviews, you'll say, yes, okay, I'll do that review. And as a reviewer, you then produce a scrappy review. It's held, it's there, the information's there. Okay. So first stage is for the reviews themselves to be evaluated. And as I've said, what you want as an applicant, you want ideally 1s or 2s, on to 3s, that's okay. But you ideally want reviewers who will give you those. Okay, that's the slide I did before. So as I've indicated, the specialist committee may have to seek additional reviews because not enough reviews have come in. And the reviews are considered to be of poor quality after the committee meeting. So I can't remember, the committee met for this last round. I think it was early December, something like the 5th of December. And we were short of reviews at the committee meeting. But at the end of the committee meeting, we were even more short of reviews because we'd have to strike out some reviews because they were judged to be of poor quality. So then the people who didn't have enough reviews, they were held as outstanding cases, and we had to, as a specialist committee, go and seek more reviewers. So for those candidates, those applicants, the process was extended. So the next thing that happens in the process is the member of the specialist committee, so say me, I'm required to make a judgment about what the reviewer is saying. Okay, so I read the review and I've got to decide how the reviewer is rating you. Okay, and this is what I see on a screen. So, and I'm going to tick one of them. The reviewer is firmly convinced the applicant fulfills all the criteria for the A category. The reviewer is firmly convinced applicant fulfills all the criteria for the B category. A C plus. The reviewer is firmly convinced that the applicant fulfills all the criteria for the C category and even indicates that some elements of the B category are evident. So the report is bordering on a C or a B. C, the reviewer is firmly convinced that the applicant fulfills all criteria for the C category, or a C minus. The reviewer is not firmly convinced that the applicant fulfills all of the criteria of the C category. So I'm making that judgment. I'm reading your reviews and I'm saying, okay, reviewer 1 for Dr. So-and-so is giving a C plus, but reviewer 2 for Dr. So-and-so is giving a C. That's what I'm making as the judgment as a member of the specialist committee. And on the committee, we were 4. Okay, so we each had our own applicants, and we looked at them, but we put those forward. Okay, and this is more of the same. So you can see that a Y plus, the reviewer is firmly convinced that the applicant fulfills all the criteria for the Y category, and even feels that the applicant has the potential to achieve considerable international recognition in the future. Okay, the committee member makes those judgments. Okay. The next thing that happens is that the reports of each member of the specialist committee are put on a spreadsheet. And the committee overall looks at the results and uses a set of criteria to award a rating. So I've got an example here. Okay, so this is a mock example. Okay, this is committee member 1, committee member 2, committee member 3, committee member 4. Okay, so remember, on my committee, I was the expert, so-called, in higher education studies. So my job was to identify reviewers for the people who were locating themselves in the field of higher education studies and who were assigned to me. Okay, but all the members of the committee had to read the reports, the review reports, and grade them. All right. So here, this is a candidate who's only got three reviews: reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3, reviewer 4. They've only got 4 reviews. They could have 6. Here are the committee members: committee member 1, committee member 2, committee member 3, committee member 4. This column, this section of the table, is the committee members grading the quality of the review. So in this one, 2 of the committee members think the review was excellent. 2 of the committee members think the review was good. In the case of reviewer 2, 3 of the committee members think that the review was good, and 1 of them thinks that the review was satisfactory. And so it goes on like that. And then they are averaged out. Okay, so for reviewer 1 is getting an overall grading for the quality of the review as good. Reviewer 2 is also getting a good. Reviewer 2 is getting a satisfactory. Reviewer 4 is getting a good. Okay, so it's quite important that you need your reviewers to come in with at least a satisfactory. If they were coming in unsatisfactory at this level, they were struck. We were going to have to go out and find another one. Now, this section of the table is the reading of the committee members of the review and what they think the reviewer was saying about the standing of the researcher. So, okay, here's reviewer 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4 committee members. 3 of the committee thought that the reviewer 1 was giving a C. 1 thought that they were saying this applicant is a C+. Okay, reviewer 2, all 4 of the committee thought they were giving a C+. Okay, and in this one, all 4 thought they were giving a C, and in this one, all 4 thought they were giving a C+. Okay, so that at that stage of the process, what was happening is that the committee are grading in this section the review. What's the quality of the review? And in this section, they're saying this is what we think the reviewer is saying about the standing of the applicant. And you can see how they're sort of averaged out in the red. Okay. Obviously, when we were doing this, we did it all independently, offline, as it were. And then in the committee meeting, we had discussions. And there were challenges because we'd read it all. So there was discussion. And here, the overwhelming majority is a C. Remember those words I showed you early? Overriding majority, so that comes out as a C. Here that's a clear C plus because it is the majority. Here this comes out as a C because it's the majority. And here this comes out as a C because it's the majority. It's unanimous. Okay, so the committee discusses all this. If it's split, the committee would have so if this one was 2 C pluses and 2 Cs, we'd have a discussion. And somebody might say, you know what, I'm going to lower my C plus to a C, because I actually think they're saying it's a C, not a C plus. So there were adjustments made in those discussions. Okay, so that's a mock example. We had that meeting of the committee on one day, and so on one day, we did that for each applicant. Right? Some applicants didn't have enough reviews, so we had to set them aside, and we knew we were going to have to get more reviews for them. But for those that we could, we did this. And then on the second day of the meeting, 2 new people came in. A moderator and assessor came in, and they looked at them again. So the moderator and the assessor checked the work of the committee. So the committee made judgments, came to judgments through a process of discussion and consensus, but then the moderator and the assessor came in and checked our work. Okay, and the moderator, it's like the external examiner. They came in, there were 2 of them, very experienced people. They came in and they indeed made changes. So it was on the second day that the final judgments, the ratings were established. And one thing that you can remember is that appeals are possible. You can make an appeal against the rating that you've been given, and you have to do that through your research office. And ideally, the research office would advise you on whether or not your appeal is likely to have some success or not. Okay, so to recap what I'm saying, an applicant's choice of reviewers is key, because you nominate 6. The 6 you've nominated, if indeed you have nominated 6, are narrowed to 3 by the specialist committee. The other thing is that you want all the reviewers you nominate to submit a thorough report, not to say that they'll do it and not do it, or to do a scrappy job. Ideally, you want all the reviewers that you nominate to submit a thorough report. You could only have a maximum of 6, but whichever 3 are chosen of the 6 that you've nominated, you want them to do a good job. Okay? And then this was like a light bulb moment for me, is this 4th bullet here. Ideally, you want the reviewers to use language that clearly indicates their estimation of your standing. You want the reviewers to use language that clearly indicates what they think of you. Now, I actually wrote this quotation down as I was in that committee, and this was a comment made by the moderator who came in on the second day. And the comment was, I'm not seeing much B language here. So the moderator had read the review and wasn't recognizing the language, the words of a B-rated researcher, of a B-rated description. So what I'm saying is that the best reviews that you could get would actually say, if you want to be, they'd actually say, so-and-so, so-and-so has a substantial international standing. You want them to say that clearly in the report. Or if you want to see, you want your reviewers to say, this applicant is a well-established and respected researcher. You want them to speak the C language or the B language or the A language, because otherwise the committee is like second guessing through the language. And these were the words of the moderator. I'm not seeing much B language here. Okay. So I'll come back to this question. What does that mean for you? What does it mean? Well, I'll leave the question. I've got some opinions about what it means. And I know what I'll do next time. But what does it mean for you? Okay. So one thing to think about, I think, is that when you make your application, when you write the application, can you tailor your application to the rating you think you would like and you deserve after careful thought and discussion with others? I mean, anyone submitting a rating, certainly for the first time, would be well advised to have a conversation with the dean, the head of department, whoever, and to say, well, do you think I deserve a rating? If you think I could be rating, what do you think I might get? What do you think I deserve? So I think it's really important for you to have that conversation with someone who's more experienced, who's been through the rating process. But can you then language your application? I'm using that word to language something. I am an applied linguist by training. I've got a PhD in linguistics, but can you language your application to indicate what you want? Because if you manage to put the language in your application, can you alert your reviewers to what you think you deserve? Can you key your reviewer to pick up on the language? Okay? Because remember that quotation from the moderator, I'm not seeing much B language here. So you could say, oh, it's not very fair to do that. But the successful people were doing it. The successful people were doing it. And when I sat and watched all this, I thought, well, what a fool you were. Okay? So it's one of the reasons why I think the system is contentious, peer review is contentious, but can you signal what you think you deserve? And can you signal what you think you deserve? Obviously, you've got to have evidence for it. And you've got to link your claims to your evidence. That's important. But can you somehow indicate to your reviewer that this is what you want, this is what you're aiming for, because they'll then pick up on it. Okay, I think this is actually the last slide, and we could go into a discussion now. So what could count as your research outputs? And your research outputs are only your evidence. They're only evidence. You make claims on the basis of your research outputs. So your whole application, the application form, I often use the term with my PhD students, a knowledge claim. You have to make a statement about what you believe to be true, and any piece of academic writing consists of a series of knowledge claims, statements that you believe to be true. And importantly, you have to substantiate your knowledge claims with evidence. That's true of your NRF application. I don't think I understood that. And as a result, I wasn't making, in my applications, I wasn't making these firm knowledge claims, statements about who I believed I was as a researcher, and backing them up with evidence by going back into my research outputs. So your research outputs are your evidence for the claims that you're going to make. And my advice is to think carefully about the claims, the statements about who you are as a researcher, the statements that you believe to be true. Always back them up in evidence, but don't be shy of making them. Don't pussyfoot around them. Don't be shy of making those claims. So what can count as the evidence? Well, invitations to present keynote and plenary papers at international conferences. Okay, they're not research outputs in themselves, because the very nature of a keynote is that you've got some expertise and you draw on a whole field of work that you've done to make as a basis for what you're saying. But they attest to the peer recognition that you enjoy. Your thesis, your PhD thesis, your master's thesis, and conference abstracts or presentations do count. Do not count, and it's not out there. It's only the publications that emerge from them that count. So just because you've got a PhD, that won't count as an output. Rather, you have to have publications from your PhD. It's those that will count as the evidence. Undergraduate textbooks or the curricular material are not considered as research outputs. However, if you've had to do research and you can show it's research that's underpinned the development of curriculum, then you'd have to put that through the Specialist Committee for Education. Developing public awareness and public education is not considered to be a research output. So if you're writing for the Daily Maverick or the Conversation, it's not considered to be a research output. It's important work. It's really important, because I think that, you know, we are funded for our research and we have a responsibility to share our research with wider audiences. But you can't put, oh, I had an article in the Conversation down as a research output. Electronic publishing is the same weight as a printed equivalent. And then while publication in high impact international journals is encouraged, in some instances, more specialist or local journals of a lower impact factor might be more appropriate. But I think I was quite pleased when I saw this, number 6, because when I did my first rating application, I had mostly published in international journals, but there was one particular publication that I had consciously chosen to publish in a local South African journal. Why did I do that? Well, I thought a South African audience needed to read my paper. I felt quite strongly about social justice issues, and I thought this paper needed to be read by a South African audience, and I thought that they were more likely to see it in something like the South African Journal of Higher Education than in, say, Teaching in Higher Education or Studies in Higher Education. And indeed, when I published it, several colleagues, people from other universities, said to me, "You've wasted that publication." But I felt strongly that I'd done that. I'm not sure in my application, I actually explained sufficiently why I'd chosen to publish in SARG instead of Teaching in Higher Education or Studies in Higher Education, one of the big internationals. But you can, in certain instances, go for a publication in a local journal or a highly specialized journal with a lower impact factor. But my advice would be to argue that, why you've done it. So why? There's one last point, and it's not on this slide. We were looking for predatory publications. So as a specialist committee, we were asked to look for predatory publications. They were not counted at all, obviously, as a research output. But the predatory publications put a cloud over the applicant. It was a big question mark hanging there then. So it's yet another reason, another reason why you should not go for their predatory journals. Avoid them at all costs. Okay, I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you,
And
Chrissie.
do you want to look through the comments? I'm sure you've been reading the comments.
Yes. There are lots of comments and questions, so I will raise those, but I'm just going to quickly use my position as chair to mention two other things. The one thing is that in the chat bar, you will find a link to the evaluation. All of our CPGS workshops, we ask people to fill in the evaluation as CPA has posted in the chat. Please click on it and fill it in. Do it now. Don't promise yourself you'll do it later because you won't get round to it, because this really helps us to plan for future sessions and so on. So that's the first message I want to give you. Second message I want to give you is what support CPGS gives you in terms of NRF rating. There's two things. One is that I can't remember when, a CPA might know, we will be having a session by our research office that is a much more what you fill in where and how do you upload your CV, and it's a much more working you through the process side of things rather than what Chrissie's given us, the more sort of insight into behind the scenes. And the other thing that CPGS does, and I highly recommend you to take this opportunity if you are planning to apply for ratings, is that we pair you with a rated researcher. So if you are keen to get rating, you email us and we will find someone in a related field, not from your department, but in a kind of related field, so within humanities or within education or within law or whatever. And we get someone who is already rated to be a critical reader for you, and to give you some suggestions and to see which publications you are choosing to put forward and just to advise you. So I really urge you, if you are thinking of applying, to get hold of CPGS and we will find you a mentor or partner, critical reader, whatever you want to call it. Chrissie, we've got quite a lot of questions and I'm going to whiz through them and I'll just pause after each question for you to respond. The first question is from Nati. Hi, Nati. Good to see you with us. And Nati asks, how significant is the age of the person when it comes to ratings? Does it matter how old the researcher is?
If I go back, you are excluded. Is it the Y? Let's go back. For the Y rating, there you go, 40 years or younger. So if you're over 40, you can't get a Y. And then you've got to have had the doctorate for less than 5 years. For the P, it's 35 or younger. All right. So if you're older than 40, you can't get a Y. You're going to have to try and go for a C. Okay.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I was just wondering, this is actually a question from me. Does the panel get to see it? It sounds like from what you've said, who is excluded? You know, if I say, oh, I don't want so-and-so to review me, does that not make me seem like a difficult person if I'm now saying, oh, I don't want so-and-so or such and such? Or is it not viewed in that?
The panel does get to see who's been excluded. I don't think that you excluding reviewers, saying, I don't want these reviewers to look at my application, I don't think that resulted in you being judged as a difficult person. What it did do for me as an expert, it said to me in the case I had, okay, I'm not sure this person does actually understand the different positions in the field, but she understands these people don't like her work. And the people she was excluding were people who sat in a different ideological position to her. So as the expert on the panel, I could see the disputes in the field being played out through the exclusions, but I don't think it meant that I saw the person as just difficult.
Okay, thanks. The next question is from Zintle. I've already answered Hi, Zintle, good to have you with us. Zintle actually asks, do you sort of wait for someone from the research office to tell you that you should apply? And the answer is absolutely not. A good dean or HOD will be looking to see which staff members should be encouraged to apply, but don't wait. If you think that you might want to apply, get hold of us at CPGS. We'll find you a mentor, and they might say to you, you know what, you're not ready now, but what do you need to do over the next year or two to get yourself ready? So even if you don't think you're necessarily going to apply right now, it's not a bad idea to get yourself a mentor, a rated mentor, to say, you know, this is where your weaknesses, this is where your strengths are. So I would suggest that if you're keen to do this, you don't wait. Yes, a question from Marcy in the room.
I wanted to add a question. I'm assuming the first requirement is 1 PhD.
Yes.
And after how many publications that one can start to think about preparing?
Yes.
For the process.
Thanks, Marcy. And that echoes Max's comment. How many research works do you have to kind of qualify to apply? And Marcy in the room is saying, I assume you've got to have a PhD. Actually, you don't have to have a PhD in certain fields. Medicine, for example, you have often top professors who are internationally regarded, but they don't have a PhD. But in most fields, a PhD is the absolute basis. But Chrissie, can you answer? Of course, the answer I know is it depends. But the question is, how many articles do we need to have before we consider applying?
It really does depend on your knowledge area. I mean, we know, for example, that people in the natural sciences, and the reasons for this are to do with the way knowledge is structured, the way knowledge is produced. The people in the natural sciences are much more likely to have more publications, or their names on more publications, than people in the social sciences and humanities. So it depends on your knowledge area. There's no hard and fast rule there. But again, you know, the thing to do would be to speak to people with more experience with you and to say, do you think I'm ready or not? This is what I've got. You've got to
just remember
you've got to have 6 best. You've got to have at least 6 because, well, for education anyway, you've got the panel I served on, because you have to nominate your 6, I think 6 best, 6 best outputs.
5 best, I think. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
So
I think it's 6. The 6 best outputs, which suggests you need more than 6. 6 best outputs for the last 8 years.
So one of the things that you do when you apply is you not only, remember, you're applying to be rated, not to say you're a researcher. If you've got an academic post, we assume you're a researcher, especially in a research intensive university, but in any university really now, if you're an academic, you are. So you're asking to be rated. So you've got to show that you've had an impact. And as Chrissie showed you, it can be a national level impact and international, depending on what level you're at. But as she points out, one of the things you do when you apply is you upload your 6 best publications. So normally people have got 10, 15, 20, whatever, and they choose their 6 best. But perhaps if you've got just 6, but those 6 you feel really do represent something that you have had an impact, then there's, as Chris says, there's no rules against applying as soon as you've got those to raise. Thanks, Chrissie. The next question is, you know, you spoke a lot about making sure your reviewers give good reviews. So firstly, Zintle asks, is the tool that the reviewers get, it's online that they review, is that tool available? So when I'm applying for rating, do I know the way in which my reviewers will rate me? And related to that question of the reviewers is, if I'm established in the field, it's easy for me to select 6 people that I know are good in the field. If I'm new in the field, perhaps applying for a Y or P rating, I'm going to choose, you suggesting we choose recognized, credible people in the field, but I don't know them. Should I still be emailing them, complete strangers, and saying, by the way, I've put your name down, you may or may not be approached?
Let me go for the first one. I'm not sure that it helps the applicant to look at that tool, because you're not going to see the review. I mean, or it's enough for you to know, I think, that you want your reviewers to submit reviews that will be judged as, good, excellent, good, or satisfactory. I'm not sure that helps otherwise. The descriptions of the categories, A, B, C, C1, C2, C3, and so on, they're all available on the NRF website, so you can see those very clearly. But I'm not sure that other thing I showed you, it's worth you. You're not going to be able to use it to check yourself because you don't have access to the review. So all you could try and do is get reviewers who will give you the best reviews.
Yeah, but Chrissie, I think what Cynthia is referring to there is, what did the reviewers get asked to write? And so that's, I know from doing it many times myself, that's saying,
right.
yeah, so are you familiar with the person's work? They ask you, you if you've started their work, they ask you about the quality of the articles. They ask you to comment about whether you think that they are, what is it? Recognized in the field, if they're internationally recognized.
Yes.
Can't remember what else.
Yeah, I mean those questions that reviewers get asked, we could but you know what? Those questions actually appear in a way. The questions are rephrased in your application form. In your application form, you essentially write to the questions that the reviewers get asked, if you think about it. But there's no reason why the CPGS or the research office couldn't share those questions that go to the reviewers, I don't think. But if you fill in the application form and you really pay attention to filling that in, you are actually answering the questions that the reviewers are asked.
Yeah, absolutely. As to whether you should contact potential reviewers, knowing that they might not even be contacted by the NRF, and especially if they're strangers to you, should you?
Look, I don't think the fact that they may or may not be contacted by the NRF is here nor there, because I think what your reach out should be was, I would like to nominate you as a reviewer. Would you be prepared to be my reviewer? You might, and to introduce yourself and say, you might not know me, but I followed your work and I've got these publications and So introduce, would you be prepared to accept the nomination? Because it's really important, if you accept the nomination, then you do actually do it, because this is the way the system works. So I think you could reach out to somebody on that basis. I mean, I don't know, I would certainly respond favorably to an email like that. Yeah, rather than from the candidate. I mean, if the NRF nominate you, or the Specialist Committee nominates you, then the NRF staff member comes to you for a review. It's out of the blue. It's like, will you review this person? And you say yes or no. So for the candidate to go to you and say, will you be my reviewer? I would respond positively to that.
Thanks, that's very useful, Chrissie. I'm going to rush along a little bit. We're running out of time. Tanisha, you got a question?
Yeah, so ideally we would want to receive the rating result, but if we don't, if we get something lower, or if the application is rejected, is there a time period by which we have to wait before we apply again?
So Chrissie, this is about the time periods. If you get rejected, or perhaps you're not happy with your rating, which will then last 5 years. Do you want to comment on that?
I don't know what the time period is for the rating, for the appeal, but if you get an unrateable response, you're not rated, that you'll get details of the appeals process, or the research office will be able to give you details of the appeals process.
And you can apply again the next year. And it's your rating lasts 5 years, but you don't have to wait 5 years. If you think you've changed remarkably in the field, you can apply earlier. Josephine asks if the reviewers get any feedback, because it's clear from what you presented to us that some reviews are actually kind of thrown in the bin as not very useful. Do the reviewers get feedback?
No.
Yeah. Okay, that's a pity.
So
Shabnam, yeah.
I can only assume by the very fact that I was asked to join a specialist committee. I was asked to join the specialist committee, and it was only when I was sitting on the specialist committee, once I'd been through the training and what have you, that I thought, oh, I must have written good reviews in the past. That's why they've asked me, because I
Yeah.
obviously was willing to work with the system. That's all I can think of. But no, I never knew anything that how it was rated.
And then Shabnam asks, do you need to be affiliated with a university or an institution to apply for a rating?
I don't actually know.
Yes, you do.
You do?
Yeah, you've got to be, because the University Research Office has to rate.
Oh,
you
they'll
as
have to
well.
look after your funds. Yes, yes, of course. Of course.
I'm going to skip Matsepo's question because I want to come back to it later. Atankosi asks, does it matter if you haven't had funding from the NRF? Is that related to NRF rating?
No, no.
Not at all. Right.
Not,
So it doesn't matter if you've never had money from the NRF. This is a separate NRF process. If you are an immigrant to South Africa, can you include work that's been done outside of South Africa in the last 8 years, or is it only allowed to be South African?
no, you're international. That's good. Include all work.
Right. Perfect. Nati asked the 6 best publications that you have to choose to attach in full. Do they have to be single authored? Does that matter?
I think it depends on the field, Natty. I think that's quite important. In the social sciences, it's humanities, it's more usual to have single authored publications, unless you're publishing with your PhD students or your master's students. In the sciences, it's very unusual to have a single authored publication, in which case the committee would start looking at where your name is on the list of authors. You know, are you number 10, or are you number 6, or are you number 1 or number 2? So, Natty, I know you're in higher education studies. So if you've got 6 single authored publications in good journals, they would be the ones to put forward as your 6 best. But equally, if you've got, you know, publications with a PhD student, say, and they're in a good journal, then you can put that forward as well. But it depends on the field.
And you do get an opportunity to write a narrative explaining why you've chosen those 6 as well. So you can show how they, and that's where Chrissie's advice to use the language of the rating to explain why you've chosen those. The last question I'm going to end with is Matsepo, who's asked, can we get a list of the predatory journals? And the reason I'm ending with that is because I know the answer, which is no, you can't, because there's no such list. There used to be BEALs, but now that there are about 100 new predatory journals every day, there's no such thing. And that is the basis of a whole other workshop on choosing where to publish. And we do have that workshop later in this year. We're going to be talking about selecting journals. We argue that you shouldn't be, we will go through what kind of journals are accredited in the South African system, but we'll also talk about the fact that you should be choosing a journal based on where you're contributing to the conversation. Where's the conversation happening that your article contributes to? And that goes back to Chrissie's point about saying she chose to publish in a South African journal because she wanted to speak to South African readers. Chrissie, I don't know if you want to say anything else on that particular issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends how you feel about, for me, it was very much about social justice issues that I wanted to speak to South African issues, because I wanted my work to make an impact on practice, but not all researchers are in that position. Yeah, it's for you to argue, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
about where
absolutely.
But avoid the. I would never go near a journal that asked me for a publication on an email, just some email that comes in. I don't know them from Adam. If I knew, I did respond to an invitation, and it was don't you think? And it was from the editors of a special issue of a very prestigious international journal, who said to me, don't you think you could contribute to this? I did respond to that because I knew the people who were asking me, and I knew the International Journal. But an email coming in, I just put them in the junk mail right away. I don't even read them.
Absolutely. So when you're publishing in order to share some knowledge that you've created. You want to share that with the people who are involved in that knowledge creation. So look at your reference list on your draft article. What journals are you referencing? Because that's clearly where the conversation is taking place. But as I say, we will have a separate workshop on the issue of selecting a home for your publication.
Can I just
Chrissie,
come
I
in
think
there too? So can I just say one thing? I chaired a session last week at the CHE conference on, what was it, doctoral education. And it was on scholarly publishing. It was run by the director of scholarly publication at ASAF, the Academy of Science. And there were questions from the audience, and it was, a lot of them were people who were upset because of the indices that are used for accreditation, DHET accreditation. So they were saying, why can you get subsidy for something, for a journal that's on the Web of Science, but not a journal that's on that? You know, it was all about the subsidy. It was all about earning money. Now, yes, the universities do push you for subsidy, but that's not why you should be publishing. You should be publishing to share your work with a group of scholars, to join a conversation. And that I tried to say that in the workshop. It didn't go in this. It was a big plenary session at the conference. I tried to say that. It didn't go down very well. But I'd encourage everybody to think hard about who you are as a researcher. You know, it's sad that we're all so driven by money and the institutions pushing us by money. You should just publish in the best possible journal you can for the sake of joining the conversation and taking knowledge forward. Put money out of the view. That would be my best advice, even though it's probably not very practical. But yeah, that's scholarly. That's a scholarly approach to publishing. Let the university sort its own money out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Let the universities worry about the money and let us worry about the academic project. If we
Exactly.
can distinguish ourselves from the university, but that's a conversation for another day. Chrissie, thank you for sharing your insider knowledge about what happens behind the scenes when you've gone through this very arduous procedure of applying for rating. It's arduous in terms of the time it takes, but also in terms of putting yourself out there. It's an emotional thing, I think. Not least because, as you say, you've got to really make claims for your position in the field, which is quite intimidating. So we really do appreciate your insights. Thank you to the people in the room for staying, and thank you for the people online for joining us online. And please, everybody, if you haven't done so already, click on that link in the chat bar and complete the evaluation of the session now. It'll also give you an opportunity to tell us what else we need to do for you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.